So as a lot of you guys may have noticed recently, with all new, all different Marvel, I've been very heavy-handed in terms of how I've looked at the line of publications, just because I'm such a huge Marvel Comics fan. And I think that as comic book fans, whether it's Marvel, DC, Valiant, or otherwise, we have a tendency to latch on to things. And we have a very difficult time, accepting when things move away from the status quo or when we want things to change and they don't really seem to change. And so it's almost kind of interesting. We have our hearts set on something, we're told a thing will happen in the future and we build it up into something in our minds. And when the result that we get is not what we built it up to be, then we end up finding ourselves a little disappointed. And so with all new, all different Marvel, I'd been a little overzealous in terms of my view of this line of publications. And the reason why I say that is I just finished International Iron Man and the new secret origin of Tony Stark. And damn, I gotta tell you guys, Bendis has not lost his touch. Civil War II is a little lackluster, it feels a little rushed, but International Iron Man is quite literally Bendis sitting down, taking his time, and writing a great story. So this new secret origin of Tony Stark is basically rooted in the run of Kieran Gillen with Iron Man Volume 5. Now, I do have a video on the original secret origin of Tony Stark, but for those of you guys who don't really want to watch that video, which you'll find in the description, and you simply want to know what happened, during Marvel Now, original Marvel Now, Marvel had come along and they had basically shaken things up a bit. It was kind of Marvel's response to DC's New 52 reboot, and it was the idea of assigning new writers, new artists to titles, and going back and fleshing out storylines and fleshing out plot threads that had kind of been left hanging over the years. And so what writer Kieran Gillen did is he had followed up to the entire Extremis event, whereby different people were able to get their hands on Tony Stark's armor, so on and so forth, the whole Extremis event. And what he did is he basically had Tony Stark kind of question his role in the world. Where was he going? What was happening with his place as part of the Avengers? What was happening, with his place as part of the superhero community, coming out of Civil War, coming out of Siege, Dark Reign, so on and so forth. All these things that kind of put Tony Stark in an existential crisis. And so Peter Quill's Star-Lord had basically given Tony the opportunity to join the Guardians of the Galaxy and just kind of traverse the spaceways, if for no other reason than to clear his mind while he was away from the planet Earth. And so this gave us some really, really cool stories. But what it also did is it set things up for Kieran Gillen to come back and to basically change the origin of Tony. Because prior to what Kieran Gillen did, Tony Stark was just the son of Howard Stark. His father had died. Tony had inherited the family fortune. He had been a genius ever since he was a child, and he had basically gone on to become a successful businessman, with Stark Industries, and eventually became Iron Man. That was more or less his story. And it had been that way for 30 years. It had always been that way. That was just the definitive origin. What Kieran Gillen did is he came back and he basically said that Tony Stark was effectively adopted. Not only that, Tony Stark actually had a long-lost brother named Arno that he didn't know about. Now, again, I'm not going to go super in-depth into this just because I have a video that covers all that, but the fact remains here that that Arno Stark was the biological child of Howard and Maria Stark, and that Tony was the adopted child. Now, there were a lot of things that went into Arno. He had a disability. He was kind of hidden away from the world by Howard and Maria, and Stark was adopted to kind of take his place, and it allowed for some really good storytelling with regards to the character of Arno, and it was kind of sad to see that with all new, all different Marvel, he essentially just disappeared from the landscape. But with this new secret origin of Tony Stark, what Bendis does is he comes back and he kind of fills in the holes. He basically tells us, what was going on behind the scenes, leading up to the adoption of Tony Stark and the events that took place afterwards. And what we're told here is that at some point along the line, there was a woman named Amanda Strong. And Amanda Strong was basically just a fledgling singer. She was trying to build up her own career. She was trying to turn her career into something that could make for a huge musical group that would allow her to just continue and follow her passion for as long as, she was able to pursue it. But during one of her performances, she was contacted by a woman named Valentina who was part of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so what S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to do is they wanted to recruit Amanda Strong, and they wanted her to maintain the cover of being an international singer, but they wanted to use this cover as a way to have her carry out clandestine missions. And so, if she went on tour, for example, and she was in Spain, she would carry out missions in Spain. If she was on tour and she was in California, she would carry out missions in California. And this would work really well for S.H.I.E.L.D. because remember, this was back during a point whereby S.H.I.E.L.D. had just sort of begun to form. And so for those of you guys who never saw my original series on, my series on Original Sin, the early days of Nick Fury, so on and so forth. This story largely dealt with the idea that somewhere along the line, Nick Fury had come across a guy named Woody McCord who had basically been going through different dimensions and, the Earth itself and just staving off threats to the planet Earth, and Nick Fury took his place. But Nick Fury also worked alongside Howard Stark to create S.H.I.E.L.D. And so this is around that time period when S.H.I.E.L.D. has been created. I would say maybe within the following 10 years after that was done, easily the first decade or so. But the fact remains here that with Amanda Strong operating as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., she eventually encountered and met a man named Jude. Now Jude was of course a fellow agent, but at the time they had to maintain discretion. They had to maintain their position as agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. while also ensuring that the public didn't know what was going on. And so what had happened between the two of them is that over the course of a series of missions, they ended up in Germany together. And the idea was that a romance was blossoming between the two of them. The issue was that they were also being pursued by Hydra, because again, at the time, this deals with 1960s S.H.I.E.L.D. And so this is still at an era when Hydra is very much a part of the Marvel Universe and is still attacking S.H.I.E.L.D. They're still considered to be, the main enemies. Now, of course, this is also the time period whereby Captain America was still frozen, and so he's not really part of the picture here. But the fact remains that with Amanda Strong and with Jude, because they had begun to form a relationship with one another, albeit being S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, they had dated for about 2 or 3 years. And so over the course of this time, this led to Amanda Strong becoming pregnant with Tony Stark. The problem with this was that Jude had viewed this life, the life of being an agent, as something that they could both escape from, and Amanda Strong saw it the same way. And so Amanda Strong actually quit her position with S.H.I.E.L.D., simply saying that because she had a child to raise now, she couldn't have this child in this life. She couldn't have the child, as part of S.H.I.E.L.D., where it would constantly be put in danger, because they didn't know if, as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., that, she would come home one day and find her child dead, find her husband killed, or something along those lines, and it was easier to just walk away and not make herself a target. With Jude, on the other hand, his motivations were a little different here. About a week before Tony Stark was due to be born, Jude sat down with Amanda Strong and basically said that he was a double agent working for both Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, in the eyes of Jude, he wasn't just a typical double agent. He wasn't intentionally betraying S.H.I.E.L.D., and he wasn't intentionally working for Hydra. It just kind of fell in that way. And what I mean here is, while the two of them were dating, because of the fact that Amanda Strong was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Hydra had come after her and attempted to kill her. And so what Jude did is he went off and made a side deal that he would provide Hydra with information if Hydra would basically leave Amanda and himself alone, if they would allow the two of them to go do their own thing. And so over the course of the 2 years that Amanda Strong and Jude had been together, Jude had basically been selling out agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He had been selling S.H.I.E.L.D. intel to Hydra, which is one of the reasons why, I guess this is really kind of Bendis's retcon, that's one of the reasons why, S.H.I.E.L.D. had struggled so hard against Hydra over the years. And what I mean by this is that if you go back and you look over the history of S.H.I.E.L.D., or I may end up doing, a video on the full chronological history of S.H.I.E.L.D., but over the course, in their early days, it always seemed as though Hydra was one step ahead. It always seemed as though Hydra always had the edge on them. Now, Bendis isn't telling us that Jude is the reason for this. In fact, Bendis really kind of hints at the idea that Jude is one of multiple agents in S.H.I.E.L.D. who were seeding information to Hydra, to say nothing of the fact that Hydra had their own sleeper agents in S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. had their own sleeper agents in Hydra, and it was really reminiscent of the spy days between the United States and Russia during the Cold War. But the fact remains here that because of the fact that Jude revealed himself to have been a double agent working for Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D., Amanda Strong hates this notion. And the reason why she hates this is because it makes both herself and her child a target for either Hydra or S.H.I.E.L.D. And so what she does is she kills Jude. Now, of course, she makes a call to S.H.I.E.L.D. under the auspices of contacting her record label, and when S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives, she tells Valentina to basically move the baby into an adoption agency, to do something with it to make sure that it's going to have a safe home. The problem with this is that S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't normally equipped for this kind of circumstance, and this is where Howard and Maria Stark come into the equation. At the beginning of the story, and this is one of the reasons why I left this to the end, because I wanted to make sure it kind of fit in chronologically with this video, but at the beginning of the story, Brian Michael Bendis established that Howard and Maria Stark were having a hard time conceiving a child. Now, this is where the whole idea of Arno comes into the play, and in the fact that Arno was kind of engineered so so to speak. But the fact remains here that Howard and Maria were having a difficult time conceiving a child on their own. And what's interesting about this when it comes to the concept of Arno is it seems like Brian Michael Bendis is writing him out of the entirety of the Marvel Universe. Because if Arno was going to be part of All New, All Different Marvel, he would have been mentioned here. But the issue is that neither Howard nor Maria make reference to Arno. There's no indication that he exists. But because, you know, and with Tony Stark being adopted after Arno was born, you would think that if Arno did exist, there would be a reference to him. But the fact that there's not seems to indicate that Bendis has removed Arno Stark in his entirety from All New, All Different Marvel. Now, there may have been something that I missed. I don't think I have. I've paid pretty close attention to the current run of Iron Man and International Iron Man, so I'm pretty sure that I haven't missed that, but it's entirely possible. And if I have, feel free to post a comment down in the comment section and let me know. But the result here is that because Amanda wanted to give up her child, because of the fact that that Howard and Maria wanted to have a child on their own, the pieces just kind of fit in by themselves. You know, it really just worked out on its own. And so when Howard Stark was informed that Amanda was wanting to get rid of her child and that she was wanting to give it up for adoption and wanted S.H.I.E.L.D. to find a place to put it, Howard Stark simply adopted the baby on his own. Now, he did this covertly. What he did is he took the baby to an orphanage, or I guess the baby was taken to an orphanage in Bulgaria, and then all the records were removed with the exception of the medical records of Amanda Strong. And then Howard Stark more or less just kind of eliminated the history of Tony Stark in his entirety and then adopted him as his own child, giving him a history. And because Stark was a newborn at the time, no one out there really would have questioned it. And so this just led into Tony Stark's life as we know it within his traditional role in Marvel Comics. Now, the reason why this was all brought on, the reason why, you know, Bendis took this road was because as part of International Iron Man and as part of learning that he was adopted, Stark more or less went on this quest to find out his heritage, to find out where he came from, to find out who his biological mother was. And so after learning this information from the woman who's currently taking care of the orphanage, Tony Stark goes and finds Amanda Strong. And the International Iron Man, Secret Origin of Tony Stark essentially ends with him meeting his mother for the first time, his biological mother for the first time, and saying that he wants to get to know her better. Now, what Bendis does is he also tells us that this will be continued in Invincible Iron Man. Now, I don't know how far he'll get into it, but it seems as though he's going to take more of a personal approach to Tony Stark, and he's going to give us more emphasis on Tony Stark's personal life after meeting his mother. But again, we don't really know what direction things are going to take. You know, with Marvel now, it's kind of hard to gauge, you know, what they're going to do with individual characters so much as it is easier to figure out what they're going to do with teams. But if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know. Post a comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought of it. I thought it was really cool, you know, and if you guys are new here to my channel, then make sure you hit the sub button, become part of the Rob Corps, and drop a like. And yeah. If you guys have any questions, if there are aspects of this that didn't make a whole lot of sense to you, again, post a comment and I'll answer them the best I can. But I will catch you guys later. Peace.